one of the things that we have in common is there is this chip on our shoulder, right? And sometimes in order to demonstrate the capability or some of your ideas, you have to prove it first. Sometimes there's just no one that's going to buy something from you at the time, and you have to roll something out.
Introducing Recorded Content, a podcast for small, scrappy B2B marketing teams who want to get the most out of podcasting. In each episode, we capture stories from industry experts and podcasters. Listen in and uncover what it takes to launch, run, and grow a successful B2B podcast. Check out and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Let's jump in.
Hey, I'm Justin. I'm the co-founder of Motion and your host for this episode of Recorded Content. Recorded Content is brought to you by Motion, a done-for-you podcast agency for small, scrappy B2B tech marketers. We produce a lot of shows at Motion. We have close to 60 shows either in development or in production right now. We don't just produce shows for our customers. We have our own network of shows as well. In addition to this show, Recorded Content, we also have 10 other shows that we own. These are designed to help our ideal customer. Someone who's on a small, scrappy marketing team at a B2B tech company. So what have these shows done for us? How has podcasting helped Motion? In this episode, Tristan Pelligrino, my business partner and co-host of Recorded Content, sits down to talk with me about the impact podcasting has had on our company, how this led to us acquiring another agency, and what this means for us moving forward.
So Tristan, with Recorded Content and on this show, we've really talked a lot about the business impact that podcasts have had, primarily on tech companies, but it's also had a big impact on us. You know, all of this really stemmed from us starting our own podcast and then deciding that was what we wanted to build a business around. And now we have a big announcement, which is that we have acquired another agency. So podcasting has really done a lot for us as a business as well. But where I want to start and to take a step back is when we realized that podcasting could turn into more.
Yeah, I mean, we have this network of shows that we've created, and that's really what's, built out our entire content marketing flywheel, so to speak. But it didn't start there. We didn't start with, what do we have, 10 shows now, I think?
Yeah, 10,
something like
soon to launch and start working on our 11th and 12th, actually, are already getting the wheels turning on those.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really been the core of our marketing efforts, is really building out those shows. But if we roll back to where it all began, essentially, I mean, we started with a podcast called Tech Qualified, and that was really where we figured out that, hey, we were a video agency at the time and then content agency, and then we started producing this podcast, and we evolved and came to the conclusion that, hey, we can produce this and really package this up to help other tech companies, which is our ideal customer profile, is really this marketing team, small marketing team within a B2B tech company. And so where it all started was we had that show, Tech Qualified, in place, but then we said, what if we can produce a show that is really able to help our ideal customers in a way beyond what we can do ourselves? Like, who can we partner with? Who can we collaborate with? And one of the first shows that we branched out and started was one with RevGenius, which is an organization that's dedicated to revenue professionals, which is marketing and sales. And I think it's up to 30,000 people now. But when we started that original podcast, which was called the Revenue Podcast, I think they had maybe 6,000 people that were registered as part of their community. And that was really the first venture into a collaboration that we had that really started the network of shows. I mean, is that how you remember it? What was?
Yeah. So the way that I remember it really going down was we tried to play in the marketing channel. That's who we knew our ICP was. So we wanted to be active. We were sharing things in the marketing channel. And I remember Nick Bennett said something like, we were constantly having like discussion, what have you, in this Slack channel, the RevGenius marketing channel. And Nick said something along the lines of like, when are we going to start a podcast? And you and I talked, and, I'm not of the thinking that anyone is above what people call free work. and it's something that you and I have done for years. We like to prove out. We always believe, whether true or not, that we have more to offer than what people know about us,
Yeah.
whether that is design capabilities, growth capabilities, it can be more on the business side or the marketing side or the client facing side or whatever. And so what we do in many of those situations is we'll take on free work. Hey, we need to build out some websites to prove how good we are at building websites. Well, we'll go and tap some people on the shoulder and say, hey, can we build a website for you? People we know or that are current clients who maybe they're not a website client or whatever. We've done it with video shoots where we're like, hey, we want to have this certain thing in our demo reel that we don't have right now. And so we want to talk to someone we know who would let us film that for them. And we'll actually do it either at cost or for free or whatever it may be. So we're never above that. And in this situation, Nick says, we should start, a Rev Genius marketing podcast. You and I talked and we're like, well, this community's got 6,000 people. We could really show off our expertise. And rather than reaching out to Jared Robin, who is one of the co-founders of Rev Genius, and saying, hey, we want to do a podcast for Rev Genius. This is what it's going to cost you. We said, hey, let's partner together on this. Well, let's build out a show for Rev Genius, and we'll target each segment: marketing, sales, RevOps, and leadership. I think those were the 4 flavors of episodes that we went for up front. And we really set out on this partnership venture to say, we won't charge someone for a podcast if we feel like it helps our marketing. And from there, that was really our first foray outside of like doing some LinkedIn posting and some podcasting ourselves, but really our first foray into like really getting seen and into the community and being, kind of viewed as this partner to marketers. And it was, that's how I remember it. I mean, very similarly to you. And, it's something that we've just done and taken that approach for years. And from my standpoint, it has always benefited us. I know there's a way of thinking that is, you should never do free work. You should always get paid for what it is that you do. And I don't disagree with that to an extent, but I do think there's something to be said about being able to show the world what you're capable of. And sometimes you got to put yourself out there a little bit to do that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we have in common is there is this chip on our shoulder, right? And sometimes in order to demonstrate the capability or some of your ideas, you have to prove it first. And sometimes there's just no one that's going to buy something from you at the time, and you have to roll something out. And the nice thing about what we do and why the network of shows that we've built has worked so well for us is because it is tied directly to what we do. We can immediately showcase how to build a podcast, how to use it as part of your core marketing function. I mean, we are doing it ourselves. We are actually demonstrating this for our ideal customer as well. So it kind of just has really fed on itself the whole time.
Yeah. And, I recently posted on LinkedIn about how we've become this media company within a company. And that's like so popular to talk about right now, blah, blah, blah. But back when we did this, that was never the desire from our standpoint. It was really, our goal was to drink our own Kool-Aid. We wanted to show the world through people who had more visibility than we did, starting out with Rev Genius, and we'll get into the shows in a second. But starting out with Rev Genius, showing the world that we can do what it is that we say we can do. And that was really it. And I think that is, from my standpoint, a really good lesson in just doing the work and not trying to always follow a hot marketing marketing fad that comes into popularity where somebody says everyone should do this, and then all these companies pivot their entire marketing function to do this cool thing. And for us, the reason we were, I don't even want to say ahead of the game, I don't want to take credit for stuff like that, but we happen to be at the forefront of this create a media brand thing, but not because we had any sort of like inclination that was coming or was going to be popular, but really that we just wanted to do good work. And I've always found that when you and I together decide we're going to do good work, we don't mind if it maybe isn't the most profitable thing out of the gates, but we want to demonstrate expertise that has turned into good marketing versus trying to chase the new shiny marketing objective. So let's talk about that. So let's talk about, we go to Rev Genius. We're trying to run this Rev Genius show, but there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. We realize that we really like working with Nick. Nick's a marketer. He's our ICP. Now, with this Rev Genius podcast, it's very the opposite of what we liked at the time and still do to this point, which is niche podcasts. So it was very broad. And we looked at it and we were like, we like what we're doing here, but it's not quite what we want to be doing. So what we really like is we like working with Nick. We talked to Nick and we're like, hey, we think we want to do some sort of spin-off marketing show. And then that's where the creator shows began. So how do you remember that first creator show after Rev Genius taking place?
Yeah, I remember we were like, let's do season 1 of Rev Genius. And we kind of got to this commitment where, hey, we were going to produce so many episodes. And then I think it's very much to your point was like, all right, well, what do we like, dislike? What do we want to continue doing, right? And I think that then allowed us to have this opportunity to partner with a creator to develop something a little bit more specific, which is what you're talking about. We don't want to go very broad and touch on all these different subjects. Like, let's tackle a core problem for our audience. Like, let's do that. And then one of the things that Nick at the time was really exploring himself was really building a personal brand in B2B marketing. He was starting to get some traction in that area. He was talking a lot about it on LinkedIn, but there wasn't really any resources for people to learn how others are doing it and how they're really committing to sharing their own experiences online, especially on LinkedIn. And so when we were trying to build a concept with Nick, it was like, well, what about pursuing a show about personal branding? It's this topic that some people think is a little, I don't know, disingenuous, or, they're not quite sure that
it wasn't as bad back then.
It wasn't
still
as
a little
bad.
newer.
Yeah, it's not as cringy as it is now.
I think Nick may have because of his outward talk about it, he may have been what spearheaded a lot of the blowback against personal branding because he was so forward, which I loved personally. I know he took some heat from some bigger names, but I loved his desire to go out there and help people who wanted to aspire to be these mid-level marketers like Nick and have a voice. Yeah,
because then at the time, people weren't sure how to get started with expressing some of the things that they've learned and kind of building that resume as they grow themselves professionally. So that show really helped kind of carry that forward for people. But I think what we readily saw almost immediately was like, by partnering with a creator on something very specific that is tied to that creator's expertise, it allows like you and I to produce shows that are highly relevant to our ideal customers without us having the expertise. I mean, you and I weren't personal branding experts at the
Still
time.
not.
Still not.
I've been posting on LinkedIn every day, just about for almost 4 years. I've got like 5,000 followers.
And we were like, rather than having like one broad show that is about B2B marketing, like what if we identified creators or marketers that were very much like the people that we want to work with at Motion, and what if we collaborate with them to develop very specific shows that solve problems for our ideal customers? It really just boils down to helping people. And if we can do that, it was a theory that we had, if we can do that consistently and continue to do that while also showing how we actually produce these shows from start to finish, we think that'll work for us. So that's kind of where it all was built from.
Yeah, and we saw it from a lot of sports media outlets. What they were doing was going around the world, essentially, and recruiting these popular personalities, these online personalities, whether they were reporters or just funny people or whatever it may be, or have unique takes or whatever, the Frank Kelly Endos of the world. Yeah, these entertainers, and these sports media outlets were recruiting them. I actually have known since college the founder of Blue Wire podcasts. We talked about some of the stuff that ESPN is doing, that Barstool does. A lot of what they're doing is grabbing these creators and then launching shows for them, not worrying early on about the monetization, but growing the brand.
Yeah.
And we started to look at it and we're like, okay, well, so if we do this with Nick, well, then who else could we do it with? And we still, at this time, nobody knew who we were, or maybe a few people did or whatever. And so then we're at this point, we're tapping people on the shoulder. So we went to Camille Trent next and said, hey, she's big. We wanted a content podcast because that's where we play. But we, as you mentioned, we can't, not only are we not experts necessarily in these different spaces. I mean, I think we're dangerous, but not considered experts. But we also don't necessarily relate all the time. Like, a B2B marketer in tech doesn't look at two co-founders of a small agency and say, like, you're my peer. Like it or not, it's just the case. They want to hear from other B2B marketers in tech about what they're doing. So we said, okay, we're not going to do that podcast, even though we really care about it. So what if we bring on another one? And so then we brought on Camille Trent. And then after that, it was one of our clients, actually, Sales Assembly. We loved their show, Taking the Lead with Christina Brady, and she spoke to our segment as well. And we actually acquired that podcast. That was our first micro acquisition, and we'll talk about the actual acquisition itself. And from there, we just kept building and reaching out to people. And then the tide changed a little bit to where people actually started reaching out to us, which was nice. That's kind of where we landed today with our creator shows, and this focus on our ICP always being what got us that next show, was how can we continue to help that ICP? And I'd be curious to hear from you as well, how it evolved from, we had different approaches throughout the time of, we wanted to work with a person, and then we also had times where we wanted to cover a topic. Mm-hmm. And so how did we balance that? We want this person because they have influence. I want to be transparent. That was important to us. We needed a lead gen channel, right? We were not doing paid ads. We were not doing outbound outreach. We needed people to know who we were and to drive demand to buy from Motion. So we liked the idea of having people who had bigger brands. Then we also wanted to cover topics, and we used that as our entire demand gen strategy. So how did we determine, was it more important to get someone who was famous, LinkedIn famous, or was it more important to cover a specific topic?
I think we've tried to balance both as we've built out the network. We've tried to include diverse perspectives from people that have experiences in areas that are very specific to our ideal customers. But then on the flip side, there are certain topics and things that we want to cover, and then we need to find the right person for that. And one of those examples, the show launched recently, On Camera, On Brand, which was designed to really solve these challenges people have when they're recording video podcasts. They want to really increase the level of quality while they're on camera. Well, it's like we don't really know any influencers in B2B marketing that have that kind of experience. And so we went out and we found someone that we've worked with a lot. And so I think, they both need to work together, but the big piece that we've learned with this strategy, really this core marketing strategy, is that it's not a paid campaign you can turn on and throw $50,000 at. It takes time and it takes work. And I mean, we are working with these folks to build a show from scratch. I mean, a blank canvas. We are coming up with a theme statement, the format, trying to understand what these creators can bring to the show, what we can bring to the show. I mean, everyone is like a unique thing in and of itself.
You remember when we were launching Rep Your Brand, and when we were talking about it was the first time we were developing this brand from scratch, and we learned really what it took to launch a podcast that doesn't stem from a company's brand guidelines. And we asked Nick, so what color do you like?
Yeah.
And he said green. So we just built it around green. We're like,
Yeah.
what else? He said, I think he said brown. So we made him a green and brown show. Like that was the extent. I mean, we had nothing to work with, complete blank canvas. And you're just like, all right, well, I don't know, what colors do you like? And it's really evolved over time, but it still is to a certain extent. I mean, that every time is like, all right, so we have nothing. Let's build this thing out.
Yeah. Like where can we start from? And that's what makes it fun. But I think, every new show we create brings something different to the table. We learn with each one, and we even talk about that on the show as well.
And so what these podcasts did, and I think what's leading to this mentality of be a media brand, is they did help us grow. People. So what we would have these creators do is tag us every time that they would post about their podcast. Just say, hey, they can say whatever they want about their show, the episode, what have you. But at the bottom of the post, I want to thank Motion, Tristan, and Justin for putting together these assets. And from there, people started to hear who we were. And we saw some pretty great growth. Like it or not, the pandemic caused people to need to create content from their houses. People were at home, and this was happening for us between 2020 and 2022, essentially, where we saw this, where we started down this path in late 2019, really launched it in 2020 in terms of being a podcast agency specifically, started launching these shows, and then the world shuts down. People need to create content from home. All of a sudden, we have creators out there saying our names. People want to trust people they know, so they're hearing from Camille and Nick and Christina and all these people out there, even the Rev Genius folks, all saying, hey, Motion is doing this. You should talk to them. And so really, it was our demand, lead, whatever strategy you want to call it. It was what was getting us business. And we saw tremendous growth over that time, and it led to the idea that we had landed a lot of logos of companies that were B2B technology companies with small, scrappy marketing teams that needed help. But the thing was, they didn't only need help on the content side. And something I joke with people about a lot is Tristan and I wanted to be able to provide more to people. But the problem was, and like I mentioned earlier, we aren't viewed as the peers of our ICP. And people don't want to hear from the content guy how to do their marketing. And, look, our clients trust us with a lot. And I have great conversations. I served as the primary point of contact for the majority of our clients over the course of this time. I would meet with them weekly and talk to them about everything under the sun. And they like to pick my brain about marketing, and they see me active on LinkedIn, but they don't really want me to talk to them about their paid media campaigns or their ABM campaigns or what have you. They're like, stay in your lane, content guy. And that's fine. And we respected that. And we, so we kicked around these ideas of how we're going to grow. How can we help these people more? And that's where you came to me. And you were like, hey, I've been looking into a few things. What if we try to acquire a company? So talk to me about those initial conversations, talking about how, you really have the opportunity to, when you're growing, to build in-house and say hey, we're just going to build this, or we're going to bolt it on. And so how did that take place?
Yeah, I think the buy versus build is always that classic question, right? And so it all came down to, do we want to essentially grow through creating something else from scratch? Do we want to throw a lot of money at Motion and test a lot of different marketing channels, like a huge paid campaign or something along those lines? It's like, well, we could go in that direction, or we can invest and actually acquire a company that is already profitable. And as we were starting to think through that strategy, the unique thing about that is if we go and acquire another marketing agency, it doesn't mean that we have to dilute the messaging and the positioning of Motion. Because that was the one thing that you and I were both worried about. It's like, hey, we worked really hard to package up video podcasting in a way that really makes sense for tech companies. And we've grown a lot there. We will continue to grow. But if we go ahead and, let's say, add a layer of services to what we do, it kind of muddies the water a little bit with our prospects. They're like, what do you guys really do? Do you do everything? Do you do strategy work? Do you do video content? Are you a podcast agency? And I think that conversation becomes very difficult to not only have with a prospect, but also just, the positioning on the website. And like, how do you communicate all of that on your homepage? And so we were worried about that. And it just made, as we started to have conversations and really pursue that acquisition, it made sense that would be the route that we would go. And not only for one acquisition, it's like, hey, let's build a collection of agencies around the same ideal customer that we have. And that's what we're working towards.
Yeah. And we really kicked around the idea a lot of whether we focus more on the podcast angle for this ICP and try and build on subsets of that solution. So acquire something that is a guest booking service or a social media posting company or something along those lines. And where we landed was actually going up market and going more toward strategic marketing for this ICP. And the company that we ended up acquiring, New North, I know that one of the early conversations and things that I noticed and you noticed was when we went to the website, there was even crossover of not just the same ICP, but I mean, even some of the same clients. We're like, oh, we do their podcast, and that's a logo on the website. And that was just very exciting to us. And I think New North was one of the first conversations that we even had when we were going down this path of acquisition. And it ended up being the company that we decided to really build this next phase around. So do you want to talk a little bit about, so New North is the company that Motion acquired, but at the same time is really working in tandem with Motion as its own entity still. But do you want to talk a little bit about what New North is and how that fits within Motion?
Yeah, so the idea with New North is, it very much to your point, is it's more that strategic driver. So it's the one thing with Motion is a lot of times when we're brought into the fold with a head of marketing or a CMO at a tech company, they've already made the determination that a podcast is going to fit with our strategy, right? So we're much more downstream from their planning. They've figured out that their content strategy will be built using a podcast. So there's no real convincing them about this content strategy. And what our job predominantly has been is to develop a strategy for the podcast, and then from there build layers on top of their podcast and have that content work for them in the broader scheme. But it's like, well, how can we, like you said, go up market or expand the way we can help clients? We need that strategic driver. We need to get a foot in the door to go in there earlier and really uncover what their big problems are from a marketing standpoint, and then help them solve those problems using perhaps a podcast as a driver for their content strategy. Or what if they, were in charge of building out their paid media strategy or a very specific account-based marketing campaign. And we knew Motion couldn't do that. We weren't built to do that. So that's why the New North acquisition made sense. And right now we're going to keep the entities separate. They're still going to maintain their brands. We will connect all the dots. We'll talk about what we're doing there in a second. But I think the unique piece of this is, and I've heard it described this way so far as we've been rolling this out, but like clients can come through the brand that we're establishing, the overarching brand that we're establishing. They can come through a couple of different doors, but it's the same ideal customer that we can help. And once they come through the door, We can help them with a podcast. We can help them with a broader marketing strategy, an ABM campaign, et cetera. But it's all the same challenges from the same customers.
Yeah, and I think what that's going to allow is we can continue to do these acquisitions and try and build this out even more and find other ways. So right now we have strategy, we have podcasts, which is like content execution, but there's, web design and dev, there's content writing. I mean, there's just so much out there now that we can continue to build into this little family of companies that we're building. So that leads me to the next question. If we are keeping them separate, how will we tie them together?
Yeah. The big thing that we're doing is we're really going back to our core strategy that started it all. Let's use media as a way to owned media to connect the dots. So we're going to actually roll our network of shows that we have in motion into a broader entity called Marketers in Demand. And that'll essentially provide all the content that's needed to really help heads of marketing, CMOs, et cetera, at tech companies. These folks that are on these small teams that are tasked with a lot of things to do. There's a lot on their plate, and we're just going to build out a collection of resources under this media brand that can help them using all these creators and experts that we've been able to collaborate over the years. And then from there, we can essentially position the different agencies that are really solving specific challenges for them, as kind of downstream effort. It's not a hard sell, right? It's like, here's our media brand. We're solving these problems. And oh, by the way, if you want to launch a podcast or you need some more help on the strategy side, we have a solution for you.
Yeah. And so then we'll have these companies that are marketers in demand companies all rolling up to that big media entity that is the overarching brand of everything. And that stems from that build your company into a media brand that we accidentally found ourselves in the right place with. But it's nothing, I don't believe, that is new or revolutionary. I mean, you look at any of these companies, Viacom, News Corp, the biggest conglomerations in the world on the media side, that's where they stem from, is their main media brand that in many cases is invisible in the everyday work, which will be the case with a lot of our clients, aside from us saying, hey, you should check out our content on Marketers in Demand, but it's the thing that ties it all together. So that's the plan. And it's been very exciting to see it all come together.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes. I mean, a couple things maybe to wrap it up is, once we launch this media entity, kind of what happens? What does that become? And I think there's some things that it'll have its own website, right? Its own look and feel that'll be related to the other brands that we have. I think this will be a permanent home for all the shows that we create. And the goal is we have 10 shows right now, 10, 11. We'll expand that 20, 30 shows, all pulling in different perspectives from different experts on different topics or themes that we can cover. And it's a commitment that we'll really just double down on from what we started with. And then I think that an entity actually has the possibility to actually grow through sponsorships and really be a revenue generating business unit in and of itself.
Which it already is to an extent, where Nick, who runs the Anonymous Marketer, he's been able to leverage people who want to advertise on his show because he has a really good following on LinkedIn. His show does really well. He is very personable. People like his brand and people want to associate their company's brand with him. And we want to replicate that across the entire network of shows so that the creators can make money, we can make money, people can get visibility from the amount of eyes and ears that Marketers in Demand just inherently has. And hopefully it's a system in that everybody wins and people get great content that they want to watch, hear, see, what have you, so they can get better as B2B marketers in tech.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, with that is an update from us. We're very excited about what the future holds. And Tristan, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, man, no problem.
Thanks for listening to Recorded Content, a show brought to you by Motion, a done-for-you podcasting agency for B2B tech marketers. We do the podcast stuff so you can focus on strategy, building brand awareness, and developing new relationships. To learn more about how you can launch and grow a podcast for your company, check out motionagency.io. Thanks for listening to Recorded Content.